Welcome back to the Sean Willers podcast. Today, I am going to be covering how I beat a cocaine addiction and took back control. After the last episode I did on my own, where I talked about what life was like living with a cocaine addiction, I had so much feedback from that. So today I really wanted to talk about how I overcome that and how I now live a life happy and free from drugs and alcohol. You know, this episode it's just me, no guests. And I'm going to talk you through how I recovered, not just theory, not just fluffy bits. Like, this is real life. This is real life that I have lived. And I'm going to ask myself some questions. You know, a lot of questions that some of you might be thinking, a lot of questions that I get inside my coaching business, Willers Fitness. And I'm going to give you the truth. But this is not to promote drugs and alcohol. This is to raise awareness on what can happen. And I hope it helps some of you. So, how did I even end up an addict? Honestly, you know, I thought I had it under control for a long time, and it started very generically, you know, drinking at the weekend, using a bit of gear here and there at the weekend. Then it would be every weekend. And then, you know, and then it become the norm, you know, then it become normal to have a drink and have a line. And just them two were always hand in hand. And I think that especially when I went into the music career that I had as a DJ, that excelled my already quite heavy drug use at the time. Now, I say heavy drug use, this is obviously, it depends on the individual. There's people using a lot more than me. There's people using a lot less than me. And I want you to take my usage with a pinch of salt. It's not who uses more or who uses less. I think the whole part of this is, if you relate to it, do you feel that you have a problem? Anyway, I digress. So I started casually. Then as a DJ, I started using more and more. And then it become not just when I was playing, it become when I was making music. Then it become when I was just on my own. You know, it had gone from drinking and getting high to needing it to stay up, to needing it to escape, and needing it as well to almost play up to my persona, Mr. Cool, Mr. Fun, Mr. Confident. I needed cocaine for that. And it made me feel invincible for a time until it didn't. You know, I wasn't addicted to coke. I was sort of addicted to not feeling like a failure, if that makes sense. You know, I was addicted to the persona it gave off for a long time, I think. And because I didn't do any of the internal work that I needed to be a confident individual like I am now, it was just ego. It was just massive ego I was projecting. But the problem is what people didn't see behind the scenes was a very depressed individual with nothing going for him. And I think it's important to just look at, you know, your own drug use or drinking. Whereabouts are you in that journey? Is it just every weekend? Is it every now and again? Is it becoming, you know, a bigger problem? Because that's, you know, a question I always get asked is, when did I realize that I was actually fucked? Like, when I was in a bad situation. Made some notes on this as well. One of them was describe a moment for me that hit hard. And on my social media, I always talk about my very rock bottom moment. Waking up in hospital, July 2021, after a night out, after a gig, nearly overdosing from cocaine. That was my rock bottom moment. But I think there was a lot of moments before that when I realized that I was fucked. You know, when I was living in Berlin, at the back end of my journey, you know, to start this change, before hitting that rock bottom moment, I had no home. I was sleeping in the studio. I had no money because it was all going on gear, and it was this is when I knew it was a problem, when I was doing so much that I felt like I was going to have a heart attack, and I used to have to lay on the floor to try and go to sleep because I thought I was like having a heart attack, having a panic attack. And then I'd still get on it a couple of days later once I'd recovered. That's when I really, knew that I had a problem, when it was destroying everything and everyone around me and I was still using. But I always remember the time when I'd been in the studio and I went there to make music. That's what I used to tell myself. I'm going to have one drink and a line so I can stay up and be creative. But it wasn't that at all. It's because I was an addict. And I'd start making music and then it would get later and then I would bin the music off. I would probably put on Oasis, start singing out my head on my own. The classic Pornhub would go on. And then the depression started. And I remember I'd been up for 3 days and I was in the studio. And the studio was grim as well. And man, I remember I rang my mum, I was crying my eyes out. I was like, what am I going to do? I'm like 33-year-old man with absolutely nothing going for him, pretending I was a DJ. You know, it was really emotional because there's nothing my mum could have done at the end of the day. But what made it worse is that after that, crying my eyes out, realising again where I was in my life, I took no action at all. I took no responsibility and I made no change. And this is, after speaking with so many people now on this journey, this is what I realise is that people get stuck because they don't do any work. They don't take any responsibility. I think that this is why a lot of people use things like therapy as an escape, because it almost takes the responsibility away from them. Now, I'm not saying that therapy doesn't work, but for a lot of people that I speak to who claim that therapy is right for them, it's just because they can sit in a chair for an hour, talk about their problems, and then go back to the same situation and do the same thing, but then blame it on something else. And I've done therapy, and I've had trauma. I've had childhood trauma. I've had PTSD, from going to a war zone. I've been homeless. So it's not like I haven't had any of that that would validate me going to therapy, but you got to take responsibility for the actions that you're doing now. And that's what I didn't do. And I realised that I was fucked for a good few years. And I was hiding it as well. I was very good at hiding it. On social media, Mr. Cool, mustache, DJing, playing records, on my own, crying, wanking myself off, fucking, no friends, no one was even talking to me, hiding it from my brother, my drug use and functioning, but empty inside, really empty inside as an individual. No purpose, no drive. Thinking back now, it's sad that it took so long for me to make that change, because it was such an unhappy place. The moment, but that moment in hospital, that was the moment where I really knew that if I kept going, I would die, because I'd already lost everything pretty much. And that rock bottom moment made me start to do the work. And the worst part wasn't even being high. It was needing to keep being high for the come down as well. I think that was the worst part about it, because on that come down, that's when reality hits so fucking hard. And that's, that was the worst part about it, I think. But when that big come down hit, when I woke up in hospital, that was when I realised, okay, enough's enough. And people always ask, like, what is the hardest part about quitting? What is the hardest part about leaving drugs and alcohol behind? I don't think it was the drugs. The drugs weren't the hardest part to leave behind. I think it's facing life without them. And this is where a lot of people, from my personal experience with talking with a lot of people, seeing people go through this journey, is that it's facing the work that's in front of them. Nowadays, a lot of people like an easy life, but easy in the fact that they don't have to do fuck all, because life, drinking and taking drugs all the time, is not an easy life. It's not a good life. Again, this is all just my personal opinion, but I don't think anyone who is doing drugs on a regular basis is living their best life. And that was hard for me. Was facing a lot of things, actually. It was facing quitting. I think it was it's who am I going to be? How am I going to be confident? How am I going to speak to people? How am I going to go out? How am I going to just get by? What am I going to do? These are all the questions that were going through my head. That identity loss almost, rolling up to a party, Mr. Cool, let's get some lines on the go. Like, what would I do with that? And then also, because that wasn't the reality of my life, a lot of it was loneliness, it was shame. It was easy to do gear and drink because it would mask over that for a couple of days. I had to deal with the fact that there was a lot of shame in my life at that moment. There was maybe not so, loneliness to some degree for sure, actually, but I always had the support there of my brother. But I think just loneliness in the fact that you have to stay away from a lot of people to start, a lot of things, depending on what your triggers are, but you've got to get comfortable sitting on your own, and that can be quite lonely, but it's not forever. It was the almost the silence of sat in on a Friday on your own, like them demons talking to you. Oh, this is going to be forever. You're so boring. Life is shit. But what I had to keep reminding myself was life was shit with drugs. Life is really shit. So I had to stop looking for that short-term fix and start looking for a long-term solution. Not just a couple of months, like where do I want to be in 5 years' time? That's what I had to start thinking about, because all gear did give me is that solution for a couple of days, but it would always go back to square one. And, anyone listening to this who's been in that situation, 100% I know you can relate to me, because you do it, you think it's fun for an hour, and then you're chasing it, and then you come to the reality that you fucked it again. There's quite a lot of bad language in this one, so I apologise. Although I don't think there's any kids listening, that's for sure. I should hope not with the title of the podcast. Anyway, so that was the hardest thing, was facing reality for sure. Cocaine made who I thought I was. Like, it made me confident. So letting go meant I had to rebuild my identity. And if you've been doing something for 10 years, that's quite scary for sure. Very scary. So what did I actually do to get clean? That is the question that everyone, always asks me. And to be honest, it's really simple. Not easy, but really simple. Control is something that I lost for a lot of years. Discipline is something that I had nothing of. So I started to fast, and I've told this story quite a lot, but I started intermittent fasting quite randomly. Someone suggested it, I thought I'd give it a go. I was looking for anything at this time. I tried AA, tried NA, tried therapy. None of that worked for me personally, because it was always trying to push the blame onto something or someone else. Therapy wanted to talk about my time in Afghanistan, or, my time as a child when I was homeless, or, the loss of my granddad who was really close to me, and AA and CA wanted to take the whole responsibility away from me and just call me an addict for the rest of my life, which didn't sit with me. So I started to fast, and that 16-hour fast every day brought control back into my life. It brought discipline. Now, I'm not saying that it went like that. It was instant. This took me a matter of years to get where I am right now. But it was about building structure. Fasting gave me discipline. It gave me control again. Okay. Then I started working out, which gave me feeling. That gave me a little bit of purpose. Started eating better, so my skin started to clear up. I started to see myself differently. When you do a lot of drugs all the time, your eyes are very shallow. Your skin is horrible, Probably, I think I had a lot of dandruff, probably. I looked shit. So when I started to eat better again, my body rewarded me with that, and I started to glow a little bit, and I must have almost noticed that. It's like, when I looked at myself in the mirror again, I could see myself. Started to sleep. Wow, when you're on gear 2 or 3 times a week, that's, I wasn't sleeping for two or 3 days every single week. over an 8-year period, that drains you. So sleeping again and setting boundaries as well on that sleep. So getting to bed earlier and waking up earlier. Setting boundaries on everything though, triggers, really starting to understand them. Just making sure that I'm holding myself accountable with people, places, things. And, boundaries on people for sure. To be honest, I was always an instigator myself. So it's not like I was going out and people were like, oh, go on, have a little line, because I would be the person to always instigate that anyway. I was that guy that you'd probably want to avoid if you wasn't getting on it. So I didn't need to avoid certain people as such. I just needed to avoid certain places where I knew people would be getting on it, because that would always trigger me. And that's really how simple it was, but it wasn't easy and it didn't happen overnight. I had to keep trial and error. I'd have a setback, I'd learn from that, I'd move forward again. But really the biggest shift for me was cutting off the toxic environment, which was the music industry. When I woke up in hospital, I had a whole line of gigs. I had this new exciting career back in England after living in 4 years in Berlin. And, we had some great gigs lined up, Australia tour, New Zealand. I was on an agency that I'd really wanted to. But I realised that environment was toxic for me. Not for everyone. I know I work with a lot of big DJs who are doing fantastic stuff, who are sober, who are fit and healthy. But for me, because I built a whole identity around drug use in the industry, I couldn't get over that. And also I didn't see the point of it. I didn't see the risk, because for me it was like, if I keep risking this, it's only going to end up with me in the ground, which, there's no coming back from that. So I had to cut off that environment, and that then forced me to build a new identity, build a new routine, build a new life. Now, for some people, this isn't as simple as that, but if you're always getting on it in the pub with your friends, that is an easy toxic environment to cut out. I spoke to someone the other day who's like, I need to go therapy because I can't stop going out with my mates on the weekend. It's like, bro, you don't. You just need to build discipline to say no and set boundaries. And that might trigger some people. And if it does, good, because that means I'm talking to you. And just on that note as well, I've been out of the industry for, this has been my 4th year now. Everyone's still doing the same shit. It's all still there. Nothing's changed. I've changed though, which is fantastic news, because that's what I wanted. And, I had to do this, build this new life, build these boundaries, but especially with fitness, that give me purpose. I believe if you have tried everything, therapy, AA, NA, not going out, everything, right? I personally think that the next step forward is giving a body transformation a go. I've done 3 body transformations now for over the past 3 years, one every year for 90 days. And every time it builds so much character, discipline. I'm so dialed in with everything. It makes me laser focused. But if you're just starting your journey, getting in great shape will give you a purpose again. It'll give you a reason to do the work. And if you've not been in good shape for ever or a long time, that is some feeling. When I did it the first time and I'd not been in shape for 10 years, when I started to see my abs, I couldn't believe it. I actually couldn't believe it, that I had done the work to do that. I had dedicated myself. We had someone, the other day who'd exhausted everything and come in and, almost thought that everything had failed, and they went through this transition of the body transformation, and we almost stopped talking about sobriety because it wasn't even a topic anymore. It was about being the best version of themselves, and that's what I love about it. And that's, a big part of my program, Willis Fitness, is we build that foundation, that structure first, okay, which is simple, not easy. And then we go into a transformation physically, emotionally, mentally, because then, you are almost like that butterfly effect where you come out the other side. And when you start looking great again, you don't want to sacrifice that just to go out and sit around a fucking kitchen table for 3 days and chat absolute waffles, because it's embarrassing. You then set a new high standard for yourself. And that's what I've done in my life now, is set this incredibly high standard, which I always want to push the boundaries to. Not because I have a big ego, but because I've been that average, below average guy, and I never want to go back to that again. So, you know, I do think that you know that process has been huge for me. I know it has, and you know, there's a time where everyone would have said, "Oh, you needed rehab," but I didn't need rehab. What I needed to do was the work, and I needed a reason to do the work, and that's probably what a lot of you guys need. You know, I spoke to someone the other day. His family spent 800 grand on his rehab, but the one thing that he was missing was purpose, because his only focus was getting, you know, off the drugs. But then when he come out of rehab, he had the exact same structure that he had, the same mindset that he had before he went. So obviously he went straight back into that. Whereas if he'd given purpose, built that foundation, done the work, then, you know, you wouldn't need to go back to that life because you built a new one. So what changed when I stay sober? Everything. I will never go back to drinking or taking drugs again. You know, it's like I was finally breathing after years of being underwater. It's crazy to think about now, but you know, I was suffocating for years. I was trapped in this cycle. Now I just feel confident. I have energy. I have self-respect. I have purpose. I have drive. You know, I'm in great shape. I'm married. I've got money in the bank. All these things that I didn't have when I was taking drugs, when I was drinking. And I'm still who I was 5, 10, 15 years ago, but I've removed the one thing that was holding me back. And if you've just started your sobriety journey, don't focus on sobriety. Focus on everything that you will gain. Because when I removed that, it really propelled me forward. But the biggest things that have changed for me since being sober, you know, I was trying to think about this earlier. There's so many, but I think health-wise, huge, absolutely huge. You know, I'm in great health now, great shape, which I wasn't for a long time. But that proved to me that I can commit to anything. My relationships have got stronger with people that I actually care about as well, not wasting my time. I'm much better at setting boundaries now. And I think that that's really important. And how I process my anger and how I process bad things that are happening, I'm able to take a step back with clarity and make a better decision. Look, I'm not saying I'm perfect, guys, by the way. I'm far from perfect, but I can work on these things now. And lastly, what changed since staying sober? Probably the biggest one is I have 7 days a week, every single week. I never miss a day. I've not missed a day. I'm 640, 50 days sober now, more by the time this comes out. And I've not missed one day since then. And the shittest day that I've had in the past, say, 651 days was the time where I had that last relapse, or whatever you want to call it. Since then, no dramas, you know, that can't be avoided. No missed days, no waking up with regret, no wasted money, no wasted time, wasted energy, just sheer progress. And I think that that's a huge one. So many people are stuck in a shit life that they don't like because they are wasting 2 or 3 days every single week, getting on it, recovering, taking a few more days to get back to 100% and then repeating that cycle. If you're stuck in that for a year, I guarantee you won't make any progress. And if you do, fair enough, but you could have done double that, triple that. I think another one is presence as well, actually, being present with the people that actually matter. You know, now I'm married, I couldn't think of anything worse than, you know, I run a business, so I'm extremely busy. I'm working 6 days a week, but that one day every week that I spend with my wife, I couldn't think of anything worse than missing that because I'd gone out with the lads for a couple of drinks and it turned into 15 and a session at someone's house. Like, And I think that a lot of people listening to this, you can resonate with it, especially if you've got kids. I haven't got kids, but if you have, you should be ashamed of yourself for missing that. And if you're not doing the work to get there, then you should definitely be ashamed of yourself for that, because I don't think missing the time with your family to get on it is acceptable from anyone. And especially if you're not even trying to make a change. How do you make the change? Take responsibility, build the foundation, build the discipline, go into the transformation, do the work, don't give up, keep going. There we go. But I went from numbing myself with this. So again, I am calling people out there with it, but to clarify, I let hundreds of people down. I let my family down for 8 years. I was an embarrassment. I was a disgrace. I was a horrible human being because of that little white powder. I went from numbing my life to building a life, though now I don't want to waste. I don't want to waste a day now. Honestly, I couldn't think of anything worse than wasting one day of my life right now, just laying in bed. I remember, I'm going off on a bit of tangent, but I did this so many, especially when I first started getting on it. That my first years in London before it got really dark, I used to go out the weekend. We were, this is when we first started DJing, me and my brother, and we'd go out on a Friday, get in on a Sunday. I'd spend 2 days in bed just eating pizza. Like, what a fucking waste. I couldn't think of anything worse than that right now. Why? Because every day means something for me now. It has purpose. Question I get asked a lot as well is like, what do I still struggle with? Honestly, some days, in fact, I walked through Shoreditch, down Liverpool Street it was, maybe a couple of months ago, and it was just getting a little dark, and it was a Thursday night, and down Liverpool Street on a Thursday, packed. Shoreditch was where I first started really getting on it in London when I lived here first, and I did just have that little moment. Like, it would be nice to have a couple of drinks now with the boys. But that lasted for 2 seconds because I just thought, actually, it's not that good, is it? But that's only built because I've been able to build my mindset from doing hard work, from being able to think clearer by not being reactive. Because a lot of the time with people, I feel that you probably have a drink because you're doing it reactively. You need to build that discipline so you can think properly. And that's what I did. I just, it come in my head, that little voice, a little beer and, a line, great. But I'm not reacting anymore. So I thought, well, actually, it would be good for about an hour and then it would be all hell. And what would be the point of that? Triggers, I don't get triggered anymore. I mean, the one maybe what I still would is the studio, potentially, but I wouldn't go in the studio anymore because that's not a part of who I am. Stress, I use with exercise. Temptations, I don't really put myself in a situation where I would be tempted. The last time I did get on it was at the boxing, and I sort of let myself have a couple of drinks and then got offered cocaine, took cocaine, and then it went on a mad one. So, I'd never do that again. So that temptation has fully disappeared for me. Again, why? Not because I'm special, because I've done the work. Because I have the tools and I know how I react now. Not how I react, but I know how I am to certain triggers because I've done that internal work. I've got routine, I've got a purpose, I've got community, I've got the right people around me. And that's important. But having all them is important as well, not just one thing. And I'm going to go back to the therapy because it's been a hot topic at the moment for a lot of people, is that don't just focus on one thing to get this job done. Now, if you want to get off, say you've had a drug addiction, or even if you've been using cocaine for 10 years, don't think that one thing is going to solve that. Throw everything at it, build everything around. Like for me, it's not just discipline. It's not just purpose. It's not just fitness. It's not just sleep or nutrition or boundaries or community or accountability. It's all of it combined. It's every week checking in with myself. Waking up, making sure that I'm being thankful for where I am. It's, all these little things that build up. And it takes time. But I am not an addict anymore. I don't relate to being an addict. I'm not one fucking relapse away from a disaster. I am just committed to a better life. And And I no longer associate myself with someone who drinks and takes drugs. I'm not that person anymore. I was speaking to a good friend of mine, Mark Plummer, we've had it on the podcast. I'll drop the link down below for that. It's definitely worth a watch. And we were talking about this, how the problem is with a lot of, you know, these sobriety ventures, it's like it's too much talking about being sober. Just don't associate yourself with someone who drinks. Change that mindset. I use sober quite a lot because people can relate to that, but I'm just not someone who drinks anymore. It's just not me. It's not a part of who I am. It doesn't appeal to me. And that change in mindset, I think, was huge for me moving forward, because then I don't need to focus on that. I can focus on all this over here, which is improving my life, purpose, driving forward. Just leave that shit behind. It doesn't serve me. So, going to wrap this short one up here. I'm going to link my part 1 to this as well, which is what life is like as a cocaine addict. It's quite deep and dark, that one. But that will give you a better insight into where I was. But what would I say to the guy still stuck? Now, I've covered this quite a lot already, but if you're still using, if you're still waking up every week saying the same thing, I'll stop next time, then you are not broken, okay? You do not have a problem. You do not have an addiction that can't be cured, okay? You're stuck in a cycle and you haven't figured out how to break it yet. Why? Okay? Because you need to do things differently. You need to change the patterns, okay? You need to build discipline, all right? You need to reach out. You need to say no to that one thing or that one person that keeps pulling you back. You need to do things differently from today. You can't keep waiting. You know, I think that's what I would say, is that, you know, don't just take responsibility. You're not broken. Nothing special about you. You just got to do the work. The work starts from holding your hands up, building discipline, transforming your mindset, transforming your body. Cut out the excuses and just keep going until it finally sticks. And then when it sticks, focus on something new and keep progressing forward. Because that's how it starts at the end of the day. And don't let it get to that rock bottom moment, because I was very close to losing everything, you know, my life at the end of the day. And I can't even imagine that. So anyway, if this hits, you're ready to stop surviving and actually start living. Willer's Fitness works with blokes looking to take back control of their lives. And we will do that by building that foundation, by transforming your body and helping you keep control from a program that I live by, that I've tried, tested, and I practice what I preach. So you can hit us up on Instagram. So a little outro. Addiction, it ruined my life. Cocaine ruined my life. Alcohol ruined my life. But on the flip side, it has now showed me that I can overcome anything that life throws at me. I am a better person without it. And I can be someone I never thought I could be. I can be the best version of myself. And if you're in that place now, okay, this is it. This is your time to change. You know, it's not a motivational speech, but it is a choice for you, okay, at the end of the day. You are choosing to either be stuck or you are choosing to break free. You can keep getting on it or you can start doing the work. They're the two choices you have. Don't try and blame someone else, something else. Just do the work, guys. Because that's what I did. I chose to get the work done. And now I'm here, somewhere where 3 years ago I didn't even think was possible. But it is, and it is for you too. So I hope that resonated with some of you today. Hope you took some value. Remember, I'm not glorifying anything here. I'm just trying to raise awareness for something that destroyed me and the lives around me for such a long time. And I'm thankful and I'm grateful to be here today. But it only happened because I did the work. Thank you.